My very first experience that I had with Jesus ever was I was probably about, I want to say I was in second grade. I don't know how old you are in second grade, but I got home from school and I had my pictures and I was so excited because you get school pictures, and I was so excited to show my mom. And my mom's like, wow, they're just so beautiful. And I was so proud of them. I wanted to hang a picture of myself above my bed. And it took me like probably over an hour to do it. And once I was done, I went and I got my mom. And I asked my mom to come in and see the picture that I hung up. And my mom was, like, looking back now as an adult, she was not having a good day. And in that moment, she stood in the doorway and she said some unkind things. And it broke every bit of my heart in that moment that she did that.
Oh, gosh.
Because I was so proud of this picture and I just felt so beautiful. And my mom always made me feel beautiful too. And so I didn't understand like her reaction that she had to me. I sat on the bed. Seconds later, Jesus sat right next to me.
Wow.
And in moments, he showed me my mom's life as a little girl and said to me, she does not mean what she said.
Wow.
And showed me the love that he had for her. Why somehow it was like this huge download to me, like what she just said to you, there's so much more behind it. Here's the grace that has been, my grace has been covering her. But here's how I view your mom. And I want to show you where her pain comes from. And it was really like just a beautiful moment for me. And that was the moment that my relationship started with Jesus. Wow. And I watched my mom as well as a little girl where, I mean, she had faith beyond anyone I had ever seen. And so there was things that were confusing to me. Like how can someone have so much faith and then say such unkind things? And now my mom I've finally brought that to my mom of that experience. I kept that experience to myself my entire life. And it wasn't until probably 6 months ago that I shared that experience with her. And I had thought, like, in that moment, if I would have went to my mom and said, hey, Jesus just came to me, instead of keeping that to myself, would that have helped her anyway in that moment? And because she was a single mom of 3.
Wow.
And hard. Yeah. And so she was doing everything that she knew how to survive, but I never did. Like, I've kept it to myself. I have kept so much of my relationship with Jesus and God to myself. In fear of that, that was the only thing I could control in my childhood. I had a very rough upbringing, and it was like the only thing that I had that was so special, and I didn't want anyone intervening in that. But that was my very first experience. And then a second one that I feel is so important to share was, it was shortly after that experience. I had a dream, and in the dream, I was in heaven, and there was tons of twin beds. And I remember like looking down, and I could see for miles just nothing but twin beds. Everything was white. Jesus was there with me, and behind the twin beds were these shelves. They actually really looked like this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and behind were shelves, and there was like little jars, and in the jars were liquid. And I looked to Jesus and I asked, what is that? And I'll get choked up because it's just so sweet. He says, those are my children's tears. I saved them all. And yeah. And it was very powerful because as a little girl, I spent so much of my time crying alone behind closed doors, where I felt very, very alone. And to know that I had him that he cared about every single teardrop.
He does.
And so those were very two defining moments of my childhood. And how that relationship, in my opinion, starts is that God's always there.
He is.
And he's ready, willing, any moment that you say, I surrender, or I'm ready to surrender. And you have to make that conscious choice. Like I feel like you have to be in agreement, and in unity with him. And it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a little girl, in some ways, I don't even feel like I had a choice. Like I try to look back, I just experienced. I don't know. I never was like given a choice where, are you going to follow me or no? I just didn't, like he came to me. Yeah. So I don't necessarily feel like I had that choice, but
such a blessing too.
Yes. Yeah. And it leads me to another thing, because it was really hard for me to understand how, God did not come to my little brother or my little sister the same way he came to me. And my little brother, was, him and I were, he was my world, I was his world. And he did not have a relationship with God, and it hurt my mom's heart really bad. But either did my dad. And it was more of, like, they made fun of him or made fun of me, called me a Bible thumper. Like it was mean, and my brother just, he couldn't understand how I could live that life. So I feel as if my relationship with him really helped me with my childhood, because I was very, very alone. I felt very alone. I was the oldest, and, my parents suffered with addiction. And so there was many moments where, they might have thought that they were present, but they really were not present, And so I would have to be present or protect, especially my little brother. Yeah. And we were so close in age too. And so it was, I still feel like we have this bond, but such a strong bond. And he was led down a different path. He chose a different path than I did. I continuously, over and over again, I didn't care how hard my life looked, how hard it was, how I was feeling. I never allowed Satan, any darkness, to at all ever get in the way of my relationship with him. Like it was the utmost important thing to me. I could lose everything in my life as long as I had that relationship. That was the only thing that was seriously important to me. And my little brother is no longer with us anymore. He was a drug dealer, and he ended up getting murdered. But I'm finally starting to feel that I can talk about this without breaking down. But I do feel it's very important to talk about these experiences, because God wants me to. That's really like the only explanation. I mean, I want to just hide in my room and not talk about it, but I think it could help people. Actually, I know it will help people.
Yes.
But he lived a life of a lot of sin, as like what we would refer that to, and he was trying to find his way through life. And his way was dealing drugs, and it was a very, very hard way of living. Yeah. And he ended up getting shot. So that night, him and this other guy, respects to him, they got into a gunfight. And one of the bullets skimmed my brother's head. It did not go in. And the other one punctured the back of his right shoulder, and then it severed his spinal cord. The guy that he was in this gunfight with, I ended up passing. My brother lived for 29 days after that. There was a guy there that witnessed the shooting and rushed my brother to the hospital. And he arrived actually at Northwest Hospital dead. He was not alive. But in the transit so Northwest is not a trauma hospital, so they had to, he had to take an ambulance ride over to Banner.
Okay.
And that's where he was at, and that's where he was kept for almost a month. And we did not know the extent of his injuries until many hours later. But his spinal cord was severed. So he was paralyzed from the neck down. And but neurologically, he was all there. So he could still communicate in the sense of like lip reading. He could still understand things. He could not talk unless like he was sitting up, which he couldn't move on his own. The nurses would have to help him. Yeah. He could scream and it would sound really robotic. Well, it was probably, I don't know, within a couple of days, because he was in an induced coma because they needed to figure out how bad his injuries were. And when he woke up from his coma, he was like looking all around for me, and I was there, but he didn't know I was there, and he could only use his head, so he can't, sit up. Well, when they sat him up, he just like screamed, "I love you, sis. I'm so sorry." And it broke my heart into a million pieces. And I said, "Buddy, it's okay. Like, it's okay. I promise." And I was just so excited just to see him alive. I could have lost him that day, just like the other family did, and I didn't. Long story short, he was able to share with me that the moment that he got shot, Jesus gave him a pillow to lay his head down on. And my brother said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you." He was just so apologetic. And I was like looking at a changed man, like completely changed person. I was like, "Who are you? You're going to tell me you believe in Jesus right now? Are you serious?" Like everyone was just amazed, and it hurt my heart so bad to think that he was alone in that moment, that I wasn't there, that my dad wasn't there, that my mom wasn't there. Because any of us would have saved him, but Jesus was there.
He did.
And he did. And so, yeah. And when he experienced that, he experienced the full love of him. And I kept asking, was anyone else there? He's like, "No, it was just me and him." And he would constantly say, "Jesus is right there." And it's like I could feel his presence, And prior to my brother getting shot, so as a little girl, I would get visions all the time from God and things that would happen. I got a vision of my brother getting shot about 3 months prior to this happening. And he's like, "Where are you getting your information from? Mom's telling you or dad's telling you?" And I said, "No." I'm like, "Buddy, you're not going to believe me, but God told me." And I mean, down to the detail of like what his son was wearing that night, what his wife was wearing, what he was wearing. Like, I just knew, and he felt so sad that he didn't listen. But one thing I realized, like, that was his journey. It was not my journey. That's the way that his soul got saved. And
yes.
So he met Jesus that night, and so yeah, it was huge and powerful for him. And I just can't thank God enough for me being able to have that experience and knowing and like having that experience with my little brother, sharing that moment with him, because I really feel that would have been really hard for me where I was at in the mental state that I was at. Yeah. I don't know if I would have survived if I didn't have that memory to look back on, to be honest with you. And to know that my brother was saved. He was a huge rapper too. Like, he loved to rap and stuff. He had no desire to listen to rap music. All he wanted to do was listen to gospel music.
Change heart into.
I'm like, "Who are you?" And it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And so he ended up passing. He kept saying, "I just want to go home." And I had to like confirm with him, "Are you sure you want to go home, like to Jesus, or you want to go home like with me?" He says, "I want to go home. I want to go with God." Because he was neurologically all there. He couldn't make that decision for himself. So he made the decision to stop fighting. And all of us, his family, got to say goodbye to him in that moment. And it's a very tough moment. But it's a very powerful moment, because how many people do you know that get to have that moment? It's very rare, you know? And so, but God knew what he was doing. Like, I just always have felt that he has been there. Like, there's such divine protection on my heart. Like, he cares so much about my heart and about everyone's heart.
Yes.
But like, I allow him to care about my heart. I feel like that's one of the biggest things. Like, I allow it.
Yes.
I allow him to care for me.
Yes.
And so, and I believe that he's going to care for me. You know?
Yeah, the trust too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I trust him. So yeah, that was, that was a big, huge, defining moment for me as well.